Hi, my name is Mang, and welcome to yet another episode about coding React for designers. Now, today we're going to learn about static data. As a designer, you want to work with data because they make your app more real, more dynamic, more maintainable. So you're going to work with dynamic content such as title, text, logos, avatars, and that content can exist from a static file such as a JSON file, or it can even exist from a CMS like Contentful, something that you can maintain from outside of your app. And that's really powerful. So today we're gonna learn all about creating this portion where you have a list of items with dynamic data, and we're gonna create that from scratch. So let's get started. So in order to start creating some data, we're gonna go ahead and create a JSON file. We're gonna put that at the very root of the project. So when you mouse over right here, let's say you select one of the files such as Gatsby config. You go and at the very top there's a bunch of icons where you can create a new folder or a new file. So I'm gonna click on new file and I'm gonna put static data.json. Now let's write some JSON. This is a very universal format. It's super basic. It's really focused on just data. So you're gonna start with curly brackets, and then we have to put double quotes. The array is gonna be called cells, and then column, and then we're gonna start an array, which is gonna be a bracket like this. As always, don't forget to close your brackets or your curly brackets or your quotes. Now we're gonna put one record, and the record is going to start with a curly bracket, and then inside each record we're going to have a title. So double quote title, column, and then intro to React, comma. Then we're going to put the image, and this image is going to be an image from the internet. And usually what you can do with images is to use one of the services such as Cloud App or Dropbox. So you drag and drop here, and then you go get the download link. Copy that, go back, and paste it right here. So now I have a single record. I just need to create 11 more of them. With every record, I have to separate with a comma. So comma, I can just copy and paste this, starting from the bracket here to the comma, copy, and then paste multiple times. At this point, I'm just going to copy and paste the data from here to here. Now notice that we have a comma, but at the end we don't have a comma, so be very careful about that, otherwise it's going to give you an error. So now that our data is done, we can just start testing it in index, for example. So first of all, we're gonna need to import the data. So import static data from, and then single quote, dot to go back from one folder, and then another time to go to the root, and then static data.json, and then save. Now we're gonna scroll down and then test our data. So curly brackets, static data dot cells, because that's the array that we created, and then we're going to start mapping it, and then parenthesis cell. So for every single item we're going to call it a cell, and then arrow, and then parenthesis again, press enter. Now we're going to return a div just to test it. Close div. Inside that we're going to have curly brackets, and then cell dot, let's say title. Save it, and then you see that the data is appearing right here. So our data is working. Isn't that amazing? So now that our data is working, we can just start creating the cell component and styling it. So right click here, type cell.js, and then let's start coding the cell component. So as usual, import React from React, and we're gonna bring also the style component. So style from style component. You can use auto completion, of course, and then create an empty cell component is equal to props, arrow, and then parentheses. Starting with an empty div for now, and export to default cell. Now let's take a look at the design of the cell. So you can see here that it's a very simple one. We have the wrapper, of course, the image, and then the content here, and that's it. So we're gonna use style components, starting with cell group to wrap everything. So close that, and then inside that we're gonna have cell image, close, and then cell title, and close. So with this we can start using the props. So using the props, we're gonna have image is equal to curly brackets props.image, and then inside the cell title we're gonna have props title, and that's it. This is our cell component. And because we created these style components, we have to have the constant somewhere. So const cell group first is equal to style, and then it's gonna be a div, and then backticks. We're gonna do the same for cell image. So const cell image is equal to style. We're also gonna use a div, but a div with a background this time instead of using the image. And then for the cell title, we're gonna use also a div. So cell title is equal to style div backtick. Now we're gonna save it, and we're gonna start implementing it right away to see if it's working. So we're gonna replace this by cell, and we're gonna do auto import, and then the first is gonna be the title is equal to cell.title. So we're sending that prop, and then we're also gonna send the image is equal to cell.image, and then close our cell. Now if you save it, you'll see that it's exactly the same. That's because the text is being passed, but the image is not really being used. So we just need to style that. And going back to the index, one of the things that I can show you, and this is a trick that I really love, is you can command click each component. So you can command click this, and it's gonna go directly to the cell component, and that's really useful. So now that we have the data in place, we can start styling it. The first thing is perhaps the image, right? So maybe we want to have a width of 60 pixel, a height of 60 pixel, and then a background color of, maybe black, and a border radius of 10. And now we're ready to pass the prop for the image. So we're gonna use background, but background image specifically. Now the reason why is because background is the general property, and it can hold many properties such as the image, the colors, and all that stuff. But if you just target image, it's not gonna replace the black. It's just gonna add a new dimension to the background property. So we are going to use URL, and then $, curly brackets, props, arrow, props.image, and then save. So our image is not really working. That's because sometimes the image is too big and it's not really appearing. So what we want to do is background size to 60 pixel. And now we're good to go. So we just need to use CSS grid to put one next to the other. So we're gonna go to the cell group and use display grid. And then we're gonna set the grid template columns 60 pixel auto. So what this means is that the first column is gonna be 60 pixel and the second one is gonna use the remaining space. And we just need to set the grid gap to 25 pixel. And then to align the items, so remember that align is for vertical and justify items is for horizontal. So we're gonna set it to center vertically. So now it's looking good. Now it's time to add a line here and change the font size. So font size for the cell title is gonna be 24 pixel. The border bottom, 1 pixel solid, RGBA, and then 000, so using black at 0.1, which is 10% opacity. And then we're gonna add some spacing between the text and the line. So we're gonna do something like padding 30 pixel and 0. And now we're good to go. Before we finish, we might want to organize this maybe in 2 columns, for example. So we have one column of maybe 6 records and another column of 6 records. And we want to center everything. We're gonna add the caption here. So let's do that. We're gonna go to index. So let's create 2 style components. The first one is section caption, and then close. And the second one is section cell group, and then close. Now the caption is very simple. It's gonna be 12 sections, 6 hours. And then the section cell group though, we can put the entire thing, the data here, inside it. So copy and paste the data. And make sure to close your tag correctly. Now if we save, it's going to give us an error, of course, so we need to create the style components somewhere. So it's going to start with const section caption is equal to style.p backticks, and then const section cell group is equal to style.div backticks. And we also should not forget to import the style component library. So style from style components, and save, refresh here, and we should be good. We have the caption, we have the cells, but we just need to style it a little bit. Let's start with the caption, which is simple. So font weight to 600, font size to 18, and then text transform to uppercase, and then change the color, of course. Let's get the color from Figma. So here it is, paste it here, and then set the text align to center, and then save. Now we're gonna style the grouping. So starting with max width, so we don't want this to exceed 800 pixel, and then the margin to 0 auto, and then 100 pixel, so that we have some padding at the bottom. Additionally, we're gonna set the grid. So display grid, and set the template columns to repeat 2, and then 1 fraction each, so that they're equally divided. So we can save that, perhaps add a bit of a gap, grid gap at 20 pixel. But we're noticing that the gap is applying also between the rows, and we don't really want that. So we want to be more specific, such as using only the column. So column gap, and then 20 pixel, and we're good to go. The other thing we want to do is to switch to a single column when the device is too small. So for example, we're gonna set media max width 800, and we're gonna set it to a grid template columns to repeat 1 and then 1fr. So when we resize to less than 800, then it's gonna set to a single column. And I guess the rest is just to add a bit of padding in case that there's a single column. So padding 0, 20, and we're good to go. So we've learned a lot today. We've learned how to use JSON data, which is a very universal data that can come from Dribble, Unsplash, or any of these really popular APIs. And we can bring that and use that in our application. But if not, we can also use our own JSON file that we create from scratch and feed that to our application. And we've learned how to use the map function to get an array and then loop that multiple times so that we can create, a component and feed that component with the data that we receive. And as usual, we always further our knowledge of style components and CSS, as well as using props. And those are things that you get better with time as you practice and code the same things multiple times, solving new problems as you go. So thanks very much for sticking with me this far, and I'll see you in the next lesson.